We're back again. We're back again. Guess who's back? It has been how long since our last book club? Because
probably 3-ish.
Probably 3 years. The pandemic sort of
pre-Panini.
Pre-pandemic. Pre-Panini. Pre-Panini.
The
book
summer
club.
before. Yeah.
Yeah. But we're back. It may have, life, right?
We do one book and then we're like, peace.
You're like, what? That sci-fi. That sci-fi was a thromp. Let's go. But no, we're back. We made it back. We made it back, and we're here to talk about Pachinko, which seemed like the perfect opportunity because not only was it a book, it was also a show starring the hoe. That's right. Lehman Ho is back. No, I think I described it as honey, it's Lehman Ho, just Lehman Hoing all over the place. Like I love it. I love it.
Yeah, like same thing when I started reading it and I couldn't remember which character Lehman Ho had been cast as, and as soon as like the one character comes in, I was like, "Oh, that's the Lehman Ho." Like that's the one.
I very purposefully made sure to not. I didn't even look at any trailers and stuff. So I read it. So I purposefully kept myself blind when I was reading. So I just wanted to see what I'd formulate.
Like you didn't sense which character he was.
We can talk about that later.
Like one character might stand out, and one Lehman Ho might play.
Actually, he could have pulled off an Isaac just fine.
That's true.
Honestly.
That's true.
He could, but
he really could. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I must say
but where do we usually see him cast?
In a suit.
Listen, the man knows how to wear a crisp white suit.
Isaac wears suits too. I mean, I'm just saying.
Very handsome man. Very handsome man. But we're not going to talk about the drama just yet. Yeah. We're starting with the book.
Yeah. So Jesse's hosting.
Jessie, I gotta. Jessie's the ringleader. I pointed this way. I was like, no, I'm flipped. So, Jessie, take us away on this magical journey.
Well, let's give a disclaimer, just in case you haven't seen the comment or you're watching this later on. This will, like all of our lives, we keep them on our YouTube page. So don't worry if you have to leave or something. That's fine. You can totally do that. We're trying to keep this a little bit spoiler free. The book and the drama are relatively the same, but they're kind of different too. So if you are had watched one or the other, you can feel comfortable in the section. So we'll first talk about the book, then the drama, and then kind of talk about them in conjunction with each other and how we felt the, adaptation compared and that sort of thing. So help us out in the comments also to not super spoil things, but we will be spoiling that in that section. So when you're in the book section,
light spoilers.
We're going to talk about most of the book. So I'm sorry about that. Also, I will try to remember to do this. There will be time codes after, way after we finish recording. If I don't do it, just yell at me on Twitter, and that will be it. But yes, welcome again to our book club that we did once.
Listen, we're bringing it back. We're bringing it back. It's the Panini. We suffered. Okay, we had a time. Yeah. The world as a unit,
And I think these doing them as live streams is a little bit easier too. At least it feels like that.
Yeah. So who knows? We might be back. We might be back with.
Sky, you have Admire.
There's more books that direction, but this is like the K-pop section.
Yeah.
Right here. I had to scooch my books over when I transplanted. I used to be in a closet. This is my library.
That's true. You used to be in that little closet and you kind of broke through.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, a very quick synopsis of the book, which I have right here.
Gorgeous cover. Just beautiful
love it
cover.
So much. And you can see that.
I read it on my phone, so I don't have a beautiful cover to show off.
I actually listened to the audiobook, which also has a really beautiful cover. It's got a woman in hanbok that comes down, and then there's in her dress is the countryside, and
gorgeous.
It's so gorgeous, and
Mine had the same cover as you guys, but just in black and white. It's a little sad EPUB cover,
That's fine.
I didn't know what this was until I just picked it up to walk in here, though.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a Pachinko.
It's a Pachinko machine.
Screen. I don't know what
I don't know
essentially
if I can
like
get
piece
it
it is.
So
Oh, that is gorgeous.
That is
Isn't that
pretty.
It is really pretty. So yeah, so Pachinko, obviously by Min Jin Lee. The best cover.
Yeah.
It's actually why I picked this specifically. I'm doing the Asian readathon, and there was like a section that was like googly eyes, and so it was like things that are pretty or something like that. You can interpret it however you want, but like so I picked this as that for that. But so a brief synopsis of the thing, because I don't think we should sit here and just talk about everything that goes on, because it expands a great
lot.
Great amount.
It covers like 80 years of history.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot that went down in the 20th century, especially in that part of the world.
Yeah. So essentially what it is a book about the Korean diaspora in Japan occupied Korea times. And it focuses kind of like mostly on Sunja, who's the main matriarch of the family, and it focuses a little bit on her like before she's born and her family, but it follows her through her life and focuses on different generations in the family, and her when she was in Korea and when she moves to Japan, and how that affects everything within like just like being outcast, having your motherland be taken away from things, being second-rate citizens, racism, the effects of not being able to figure out who you are, like you're a Korean who's been forced to come to Japan, so you don't know where you stand and everybody hates you, or like you may be born of a Korean family but you've lived all your life in Japan, and it like focuses on each of the characters in that way, and it's a very linear book. And it just focuses on all, like, basically mostly on every, like, person in the family. There are a couple of chapters where they kind of branch into the other characters, but it's mostly the family. And even when they kind of branch out, it's, like, it's people who are
related
close
to the family.
Yeah,
like,
super
people
close. But it's, like,
with the family.
It really is kind of focusing mostly on the family, which I think is, like, a really interesting dynamic, because then it also does things where, like, you would think that like there would be more I don't know, exciting things that happen, or like more drama that happens, but they're always kind of like on the sideline of it too, so it's like it's really interesting. But so all of us have read the book. So
yeah, I haven't actually finished it, but I don't think I'm going to at this point. I was a little too depressed in the third book, so
but
I got about halfway.
You're fine with us talking about it.
So I'm okay with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So like, how did everybody feel about the book, just in general?
I really appreciated how it was linear. I liked that, how it built on itself. I actually found I really enjoyed the book, but I found that it was just very simple, which is nice given that so much does happen just because the expanse of it. I kind of appreciated the not flowery language, but at the same time, you don't get a heck ton of description like about settings necessarily or whatever. So like, as far as what I imagined as I was reading, it was always very sparse, like everything, just because it was always just focused on what this person was doing and what they were going through, and that was like pretty much it.
Yeah.
So
the way I sort of described it to my husband was that it was sort of like a historical record of this family. So it wasn't so much like some sort of fictional like incredible tale, but it was just sort of like, how like when you're watching a Seiyuk and they have like a historian like writing down that's essentially what this felt like, was just sort of like a historian writing down everything that happened to this, well, not everything, but like the big events that happened to this family. It was really interesting.
What I sort of building on both of those, what it kind of came across to me like was that this was all sort of from Sunja's perspective. So like even the parts that were about her parents were sort of the story she had been told, and her not being very educated, not being, like it gets pared down. This is the part that she's seen. This is the part, this is
This is
like,
the important
it
information
came
you need.
across in her sort of like her voice almost, even though it wasn't all in her voice, right? It was, but it was simple the way that, in a sense, she was simple. Like, you know.
Yeah, I felt like what I like kind of thought about it that I thought that was like really interesting. It's almost like it was just like vignettes of time. So like almost each chapter focused on one character and one event, like major event or whatever. And it said what it needed to say. It didn't like actually like go through like, even though the like entire book goes through decades, like within those like little things, so maybe only like a week or so we're like actually like spending with this like one story or one point in their life. And it was this little vignette of what it is, and then at the very end they kind of like sum it up and then they move forward. Like it never like lingers. And I really liked that. Like I liked it. It was very much like a diary documentary style. And I actually watched I think it was like PBS had this book as one of their book clubs, and they had Minjali on, and she said because like someone like they had asked people if like what like questions they had, and one of the persons kind of came on and was like, I'm a teacher, how do you think I should like present this book? And she said she wanted people to look at it as community and family. And there's this kind of like how historians fail you, not in like a bad way, because it's just because they can't. So like if someone's illiterate, you're not going to hear their story unless you know them personally, and that's just not going to happen with every historian. So she wanted this like kind of spotlight on this, just the stories of this family, which is what we get within the book. That's like literally what it is. And I really enjoyed that, because I kind of always like that it was not that it was mundane, but it didn't have to be so exciting or like action packed. It's not like the kids were going off to war and you're hearing all about this.
It wasn't
stuff.
they weren't telling like a tantalizing tale to like keep, you know, like, ooh, we gotta zazz it up. It's like, no, this is just a real person's life and real things that happen to real people. And
it also
sometimes it's exciting and sometimes it's mundane.
It also wasn't necessarily like incredibly introspective with a ton of thoughts added. Like there were some, but it would be very, again, stripped down, very simplified of that. So like you would have an insight into a character's thought, but it would really be like, here's the extra sentence you get of that, and that's all you're getting.
Yeah.
So I even appreciated that, because again, sometimes when you're reading a book, you get lost in a character's thoughts, and it kind of is like taking away from the action that's going on. But yeah. Well, I really enjoyed it.
I liked in the sort of second section that when they start dealing with like World War II going on and all that type of stuff, that it's not sort of this big, and then war was declared, and you know, you see how it like it didn't really affect their day to like there wasn't a start date for when it started affecting their lives. It was like it was just sort of like, oh, food is harder to get and things are harder, but it wasn't, like you said, it's not, you know, the story of how their sons were conscripted, or, you know, like it wasn't that story. It was just the story that most people in a war have of
the ones that you don't hear about.
Yeah, the ones
to like live our normal lives.
Yeah, because I mean, like we hear, if we're gonna talk about that time, we're gonna hear the like firsthand accounts from like people along the front lines, and that's what we're gonna get most. We're not gonna get like the you know secondary characters who are just like, I was just trying to live, or like we couldn't get rice, so we had to do this, or like the like kind of downfall of that, because it's, I mean, in essence, I guess not the like fantastical interesting story, but it was interesting to me to be able to see this other side, because then you kind of like saw the way that people had to deal with things that aren't just like sacrificing yourself like through death. You're sacrificing yourself through other things, and it's like giving you a really grounded perspective, especially since we have Sunja as like the main matriarch of the family, and who were like, even when we're talking about other characters and we're going through other things, she is the main person. And so you got this like really good like almost focus on the females in the family more than anything, even though we do go through like, you know, the the males in the family, you get like a lot of that perspective with the females. Like you get to see how females are dealing with everything and how they kind of have to be the like silent breadwinners of this,
which is like it's usually a narrative that's like forgotten in war, because it's like, yes, war heroes. It's like, well, you also have this whole other group of people that are suffering and doing things, and
if you're talking about, you know, a percentage of the population that's kind of considered the lowest within like the Japanese society in this case, the lowest of the low, the women not having all the access to things or whatever. Like, I mean, it's usually the story that doesn't get told.
Yeah. When I was reading it, the thing that kept coming into my mind, especially during the war parts, was it kind of reminded me of that movie. It's a few years old now, called Cold Mountain.
Yes, Cold Mountain, a classic.
Like, it had kind of that same vibe of like, it's not really about the war. The war is the thing is it's happening, and we're talking about how it affects women and children, and like, you know, what that does to the people who are not on the front lines.
And it had, like, the book to me had a lot of things to say about identity, but it never like, again, since it wasn't very introspective, it was never this treatsy about identity, but as far as that became a theme, just because of their homeland and where they were and the stuff that they had to put up with all the time constantly.
I felt that they kind of or Minjin Lee kind of like didn't overtly talk about things, but she like brushed on things that like if you had lived through it or you had a relative who lived through it, you would understand immediately. And maybe like as outsiders, because we all are, like, it was not part of our like history or like have people that like we could talk to about this, but like I liked that it wasn't overtly like in your face a thing, because I kind of like when that happens, it kind of feels like potentially that you're like pandering to like the white audience, and like I don't want to be pandered, and I don't want to, like, as someone who is Asian who's watching this, or like Asian American and trying to like focus on their history and that sort of thing, I want them to feel like represented, like, because this is their story. I'm just here as a bystander, like I'm the outsider, and I think that's kind of
I'm here to learn
where she kind of did things, where she was like an outsider, but even though she still herself is technically an outsider, because I know that Minjin Lee, was born in Korea and then she moved over to America when she was like 7. So she's very much like her culture is a lot through here. And so it's like, I think it focuses on a lot. Yeah, it's not a history lesson. It is what it is.
It is a chunk of history. Yeah. It's not teaching you.
But also, so like if you knew nothing about Japanese or Korean history at all and you picked up this book, you could follow what's going on.
That's
too.
true.
Yeah, that's what was also nice about it. It wasn't out of reach.
Little sprinklings, like the Japanese comfort women. It never was like an immediate person was one, and you didn't really like talk about it, but it was like the rumors, like the little like hushes about it. So you knew that it was happening and it was there and it was acknowledged, but we didn't spend time on it because we weren't talking about that. Like, even though that's a thing, we can still talk about other things that are happening, because like other things, like, you know, just like the like small little like microcosm racism that they're experiencing, or like just like specific things like not being able to eat your cultural food. That's like a huge thing.
The white
the grand
rice
scheme of
thing,
things is not like
I had
thing.
no idea that like white rice was like.
I didn't know that like the Japanese like hoarded on all of it. Like that's something I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that like I got out of it, and this kind of stems with on it, so it's like twofold for me, but like my favorite character of the book is Hansu, like hands down. He is like the most interesting.
He is the most interesting character,
and he kind of like really ties into this, like what we're talking about, how this thing's set up, because in the like book, Hansu actually is kind of like a faux narrator in a way. Like, so we have Sunja, who's supposed to be the narrator, but it's like it's just her life. He comes in and he's the one who brings in like the major time things. and he comes in when major things are happening. It's not like he creates it. He doesn't ever create it, because Hansu's very like crazy. He's like a like he's a villain who's not a villain. He's the morally great character who's not he's not a morally great character. He's like just very matter of fact. Like he's just like rounding force in everything. And you barely talk to him at all through the book, essentially.
Like he's not a villain. He's a man who adapted to his circumstances the best that he could.
Yeah. And like in a way that like you probably like his personality and the way that he functions is not that of everybody else in the world. He's just like, this is it. This is strict. So he's not like actually a villain in the sense of like where we think villains are. Like, yes, a lot of his stuff he does is not good, but it's not a thing. But like it the way that they tie him into she ties him into the book is just very interesting to me, because it is like, I thought he was going to be more. And instead he became this like when, things were happening where like people were bombing, they wouldn't have known about it. So he was the one to like tell the story and tell the reader, hey, bombing is going to happen, and then like move it on to a different thing. And like, I guess like in a way he was there to like be like, oh, maybe he's going to do something, but he never does anything. He literally never does anything. He actually mostly respects her wishes, like for most of the time.
He only ever does good things for her. She doesn't appreciate them and doesn't want him to be doing them, but he does it anyway.
I mean, I will say, okay, initially though,
okay,
our first introduction to him is he is kind of a selfish, dick. But like, after
he's
that,
very matter of fact of it. He
much,
just wants a male heir. That's literally what, and he wants it Korean. That's literally it. It wasn't like he
takes responsibility later, right? Like he does try to take responsibility. It's just he's doing it. He sees it this way. Let's do it this way, and doesn't understand why she's not like falling in line. I'm very logical. I've got a good logical plan here, and he's like,
it was a logical plan. I'm admit it.
Like straightforward.
Sure.
Like
it was straightforward and logical.
Whether it's good or not.
But it did not work for her, and
that but like.
It totally reminds me of that era too, though, right? As far as like, I know my grandmother, she was going to school for nursing, and then all of a sudden my grandfather came on the picture and was like, nope, you're not going to do that. You're going to this is what you're going to do. And then typically women would say, okay. And then that was their path that the man decided.
He's fantastical in that like none of the other women are getting this like rich guy to like fawn over, right? But like he's not fantastical in that like that's kind of the way that a lot of men are, especially at this time. And I think it like kind of focuses more on like there might be even like whether we want to admit to it or not, a need for that kind of matter of factness in this, like because everything is so bad and like everything is terrible and people are out to get you, and like you're not in a good spot. You have to just kind of take things as you will. And I think he even like in the very beginning talks about like watch people when they get money, because that's when they like change. And so like in that respect I really like it. Also I think that like he really gives you another character like that's a male perspective, because I think a lot of the stuff you see each of the males in Sunja's life are very drastically different. Her father is different than her son Noah, and Noah's different than her other son Moses, and like different than Isaac, and then different than Hansu, and then like they're all, or then the brother-in-law, they're all just like different. And I think it like he just adds to that like extra Korean men at that time, and especially like he in himself, even though we don't get it in the book as much, he is upended because he's with a Japanese family and working for the Japanese, and he's still Korean, but he doesn't have any other Korean people in his life. Like he just he doesn't have that family. Yeah.
And his matter of factness, like his logical steps really come in handy in the middle section of the book. Like it's pretty useful to everybody at that point. I mean,
it makes you realize there are certain types of people that maybe during nice friendly times you don't want to hang out with them necessarily, but like in times of
good in
survival,
a crisis. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I find his character so interesting because like all the things that he liked about Sunja were why she wouldn't go with his plan.
Mhm.
Like, so he sort of played himself in that way because like she would have never agreed to be his mistress. Like, never. Like, he knew this, but yet deluded himself into thinking,
Well,
yeah,
like,
she might.
I think it's almost like he didn't understand that that's what he needed. Like, I feel like what Sunja offered was what he actually needed to connect with his heritage and his roots. And he just didn't understand that, whether that is a personality trait, that whether that's like how his brain functions, whether it's a product of like his upbringing. We don't get any of his upbringing in the book. He is very few times he shows up, sprinkles in, and then walks away. And he really, I think he is just used as a narrative device.
Yeah. He dusts his presence over things and then disappears again.
But what's nice about it is like, even though he was often the instigator of change of scene or change of location, like he was often these things, but it never felt like that.
Yes.
In the moment. It felt realistic. It never felt like, well, he popped up and did something again. Like, it never felt like that.
It was like a couple times.
That Hansu.
Is he gonna do something? Is he gonna like...
Yeah, there was a foreboding when he was around. I will say that. Like, sometimes it would be like, he's hanging out around them a little bit much. What's he gonna do?
And that's why I think I personally just, like, really liked him. Because he was so mysterious and so, like, in a different way. Like, he pushed the story along, but like he was mysterious in this very real way. Like, he wasn't fantastical mysterious. Like, I like, if you told me like he was on the spectrum or something, I would be like, okay, I understand that. Like, there's a very logicalness to all of the things that he does.
He was crime family
even
mysterious.
Though it helped
like
Sunja a lot, like that might be a little bit fantastical. It never was absurdly that way. And like the way that he helped really kind of focus on like, him being like, yeah, I told you I want a male and I'm gonna do right by it. I literally told you that from day one. Even though like the way that it happened was a bad thing, he still like was like, this is it, I told you and I did it. Like, there's no other like steps here. Like, I'm not lying in any of this. Like, and I think that's why I was like so like interested in him. I was like, that's like so interesting.
The bits that we do get of his like childhood when he talks about, having this dad who was drunk and getting into crime and why he kind of got into crime initially and all the little scenes where he's like, oh yeah, I know how to like search for mushrooms and hunt and do all this stuff because if I didn't, I would be dead. Like it's interesting. Like you get that little bit of like sense of, okay, like he wasn't formed in a vacuum. Like there's reasons why he wants to provide good things and why he is willing to cross lines for money because he remembers what it's like to have no money. So he wants to have money and he wants his kids to have money. Like he wants so that they can do things with that money,
Yeah.
And also you can understand, so Sunja, who's somebody who at the time that she meets him initially, isn't near as downtrodden as later on through life, but she's still from such a poor family. She gets so intrigued by him because he has like stories of the outside world and wow, but you do know how to do laundry. Like, because usually I'm sure when she would think of probably a rich person, they typically wouldn't ever do their own stuff. Yeah. So it would be like, she's like, you're an enigma because you're like doing poor person stuff and rich person stuff. Like, how are you doing that?
She actually sees it. Like, he actually like, I mean, he takes charge. It's not like he's like, oh, I could do this. And then he kind of just like makes her do it. It's like, oh, I know where mushrooms are here. This is where mushrooms are. Get them for your family because you need them. Like, it's just like, oh, okay, you're actually like true about this.
Yeah.
Did you find any of the other characters interesting more than the others?
Okay,
I really
so like
Isaac. Like he's just a good guy.
Just a nice moral dude.
Good person. And you're like,
what I sort of like about the character of Isaac is, and Amanda, pre-warning, I'm not meaning to assault your religion right now. But what I liked about Isaac is that his character really showed the failings that the Christian church has in moments of crisis, because he was so adherent that he didn't know how to like protect his family, because he was like, God will protect us, but God will not protect you from the Japanese police if they think you've been talking about workers' rights. Like,
yeah.
So you need to, you can't just have these high ideals. You also have to be grounded in reality. But then on the other hand, you have the brother whose name is
Joseph,
who was too grounded in reality that he let it like destroy his life and his personality and become just an absolute awful human to be around. And so it's like they really were like two ideals where they should have both sort of moved a little bit
to that center,
towards the center.
I found that Isaac, for me, was a very good example of what can be very right about Christianity, or what should be, like he was an example of what it's supposed to look like, which I found was in very contrast with, especially in North America, what we see of the church often is not I should, this poor pregnant girl, I should help her. And there was
a lot of that. There was zero sketchiness about that too, which was nice. It wasn't like I'm going to take advantage of this situation,
right?
But also there was like a clear, like you had a lot like with her helping him, like legitimately helping him. So he legitimately understood who she was as like a person, and he didn't look down that aspect on her of him because of it. Like I thought that like it was interesting when like he clashed with the senior pastors and stuff, but I think it was like also a really good look at like the beginnings of Christianity in Korean society, how it was affected when you moved to Japan, and how it was like, not like a good thing actually, like it was, they were, always in danger, but also then having him as the youthful pastor, and then having like the older pastor who was not like that he was like terrible or mean. He was just very
he understood the reality of where they were living. He
like
wasn't
both of them,
ideal,
like the one that was like at the church, like in Korea, and then the one that he goes to later. Like they both were very grounded and very like old ways. And so it was like a nice little like nod again, because again, the whole like story is about like generations and the differences. And so it like was another way to get like another generation's look into this, especially with Christianity at that point. And when it's not as prevalent in the society too. Like, so it was like very interesting in that way.
And I need to say, I'm not saying that his Christianity was bad. I just need to point this out. What I'm saying is like, it wasn't grounded in the reality of his situation. And so since he was too idealistic with it, it was literally his downfall through his idealism, when he could have not compromised his morals, but still just gotten arrested.
Even just like when he gets to Japan and you realize that this man has brought a family to Japan and has no idea how he's making money, and you're like, no.
You're like, sure, God will provide metaphorically, but you've got to provide physically.
You should find out if you're getting paid. Like that's seems reasonable.
I mean, he's a very good counterpoint to Sunja, since she is like the epitome of practicality and like steadfastness and everything else. But I really appreciated their relationship. They didn't even, in the book, they don't even have that long of a relationship. They don't go super deep into all the feels of that, but you see that the time that they did have together, they seemed to get along well.
Yeah, there was affection there.
Yeah.
The first book within the book, right? It's divided into 3 books. The whole time I was reading it, what it really reminded me of, and I think Becca will appreciate this analogy, but it really reminded me of those like from the 80s and 90s, these like Christian romance novels, like it's very much like a Janet Oakley, right?
Livingston Hill novel.
Love Comes Softly or whatever. Like it's a very, if Janet Oak was Korean, this would be the story we would get from her instead of the Canadian prairies. It would be this,
no, like,
right? Like it's very,
you know what?
Like the mom, Christian guy taking care of the woman in distress, and then they fall in love. Like,
no, my mom collects Grace Livingston Hill novels. It's like her collection, and that's you're right.
Exactly, right?
But like it would end after they got married. That would be
it would be like
the end of the novel. You're done.
Or it would end after they like fall in, once they start having sex because she's fallen in love with him too or whatever, right? Like that would be the like and happily ever after, right?
Yeah.
I'm certain it is. Like,
because the Book of Hosea and all those things. Yeah.
Well, I kind of think like it kind of focuses. Okay, so the greatest like thing is the reason that the Pachinko is named Pachinko is that it's focusing on Sunja's gamble at life for a new life, and I think with like Isaac, it really represents that in like the most drastic way, especially if you compare it with Sunja. Sunja is the person who goes into the Pachinko parlor, plays a couple rounds, maybe wins, maybe doesn't, but doesn't like bet all of her life on that. She just is like, I need to do a couple, then move on. But like Isaac's character is the person who would be there constantly. And like, if only I just like have a little faith, let's just keep on like thinking that like this is going to happen. It just is going to happen if I just have faith. And then, in a sense, he ends up losing all of his money in terms of losing his life. And I think that, like, it's two people gambling, not necessarily a bad thing, but, like, Sunja has more of a grasp on what, like, needs to happen. And she got, like, out of it a little bit more than Isaac obviously does, because he ends up, in jail and then passing away. But like I do feel like it's one of those things where it's like it's not that he was ever bad or anything.
No,
like,
he was a good guy
doing that. And like he was just kind of like too idealistic. He was too hopeful, and he just didn't realize the actual reality that was going on. And I think they kind of like focus on it a bit like this in like little bits. It seems that like his family is super rich. So like when they go to Japan, obviously they're not as rich, but they're still like richer than everybody else. And like if they have
own
been in
their
Korea,
house.
And in terms of Sunja, they didn't even own the boarding house that they lived in. So she knows exactly what happens with actual living in a world where you're like just doing work and living paycheck to paycheck and scrounging up whatever she has. And he doesn't have that. And then he ends up kind of being in this like faith-based like situation where it kind of then is like,
I kind of felt bad for Isaac in the sense that he always idealized that middle brother, that older brother who, had died for the effort, for Korean rights and everything. And he always admired him and like wished he could have been that brave and all this stuff. And like he winds up dying for the same thing, but without ever having that moment of like, I stood up for my rights or whatever.
He accidentally dies for the same.
And you're like, like you feel like it's one of those things where if you knew that's where you were going to wind up anyway, then you would take that stand, or you would do the thing that you wanted to do, because if you knew it was all going to end up in the same place anyway, at least you might have had that moment,
Yeah.
But he was also conflicted too, because I think like at the end of the day, he wanted a family more than anything. And I think that's what a lot of people actually like more than like will admit. That's the reason why they go into religion and why they go into church is for a family and for that connection. And like he may have like done it and he didn't realize that along the way he was going to find Sunja, and Sunja could have been his family. I mean, like they started it, so they had a family, but she could have been his full family, and he just wasn't expecting that. But like I do feel that like his actual greatest mission was Sunja. Out of everything, like his like helping her in a place that he knew was pretty bad, and that like she needed to be out of the way, and even though it put her in like a greater distress because she was not with her family, she was in a country where she didn't speak the language and that sort of thing, he gave her the life that she probably never would have had if she stayed in Korea.
Especially in that small moment in time when they met, she really needed to leave then. Like, or else things were going to get bad for even everyone around her, and she definitely didn't even want to cause that for her mother and things like that. So gave an escape route in the very moment she needed one too. I thought that the Moses character was kind of interesting as a kid. There's not a lot to talk about there, but just like kind of the difference between Noah and Moses, and as they grew up and stuff, and who they became and what they ended up doing and things.
They almost cool. The way, like when they were children, what the contrast that I saw was almost that while Noah was Kohansu's biological child, spiritually he was Isaac's child, and vice versa. Like Moses behaved more like you kind of suspect Kohansu might have been like in his teen years, right? Like he had a little bit more of that rough, like willing to do the violent
do what it takes
to do, you know, all right. And it was just sort of weird to see that these two brothers had different dads, but like they were taking after the other one's dad in some senses initially.
It was also interesting that they both picked up on it, whether they knew about him or not. They knew something was up, and like the book didn't spend a lot of time on that. Like I think we'll talk about it later. The drama, I think, spends a lot more time on that, but like you could tell that they knew something was different, and it wasn't just because you know Sunja was pregnant with Noah before they came. Like they felt it, and I think they had just had it was always a difference, even if they didn't hate each other, and even if they didn't like use that against each other. It was an interesting to see how the difference is between them, because I also thought that Noah was very interesting, and I think the way that his life progressed was an interesting take, because it really kind of focused in on a different way of like, because you know he was essentially, you know, he was born in Japan but he's Korean, and he decided, no, I'm just going to pretend that I'm Japan, and then later on the you know knowledge of who his father actually is, it was too much to bear. But it was also like something that like he already knew that was a thing. Like he didn't know that like he had a different dad, but he knew something was different, and it was like he finally understood that, and that's kind of why he tried to be someone who he's not. He tried to be Japanese when he was not. And I think it's like interesting play against his brother, who also didn't want to like embrace his Korean side, but like did it in a different way too. Like because he actually like felt a lot more of like the actual atrocities of a Korean blood born in Japan as opposed to Noah, because Noah was like kind of favored by everyone, even though they all knew he was Korean. Like he was the like bookkeeper,
because he was so smart.
He was so smart, and everybody just like liked him.
He was one of the good ones.
Yeah, and so and like you know, his brother was the troublemaker and was like had a lot more people like be racist towards him, and so like he moved from it because he wanted to just find his own path, as opposed to Noah, who was like, I want to be Japanese just because that's the best way for me to like hide in this world.
You really see the that sort of aspect of when it like in a diaspora, like how some people just want to fully assimilate, and then some people want to be themselves or find how to meld the two things or find how to exist within this other culture. But other people are just like, I'm just going to take that whole culture. Like, I just, you see that a lot of times with them, like first generation parents not even teaching their kids language or anything because they just want you to be, just be American, just be Canadian, like let the rest of it go. And then those kids growing up and like trying to learn their language so that they can teach it to their kids because they want to pull some of that back,
And then I always think there's a lot to that. So like the first generation parents, it's often they only have so much time to afford with that kid. So it's like, in order for you to survive the best in this situation, just learning this one language completely and fluently is going to help you the most. But then when you get a generation out, when you usually have a little bit more money and a little bit more time with those kids, they can almost afford the luxury of experiencing the rest of their culture. Culture.
Yeah, especially because that the parent, all they know is that they come to a new land where people aren't speaking their language, and they know that if they just understood, it would help them quickly and easily. And so then they translate that into their firstborn or the first, kid, and that's like their focus. And then like generations out, it starts to be easier to like have both, or to see the how being, bilingual or multilingual actually helps even further. And it would have been easier if we had just started at the beginning because we were already there. And now I'm like learning from other
people. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's great if grandma's still around and like, I mean, so then you have this balance, but often you don't have that.
My mom was born, she was Old Order Mennonite is how she was raised, right? So she grew up speaking German. And then like me and like most of my cousins, we all took German in high school to learn to speak German because none of our parents spoke German to us at all, ever, right? Like other than like, when they got angry and suddenly they were like yelling at you and, not swear words because they were Mennonites. They didn't, but like it was, so it was like, and mostly because we would go to these family dues with extended cousins who were all still Old Order Mennonite and speaking German, and they would sit there, and even though they went to English schools and did speak English, wouldn't speak English to us because they knew they could. And so all of us were like, we are going to get into high school and learn how to speak German so that we can go to these family reunions and like know what they're laughing about.
Listen, now the real trick is to not tell them that you've learned German and to then sit there and be like, the tea is fresh. It's like when you travel like to another country whose language you speak, but like people don't realize you do. People can be hella rude.
Oh, of course,
hella rude if they don't think you speak their language.
I also found it interesting and how Sunja, I mean, as far as I could tell in the book, I don't think she had ever learned to read or write, like even throughout the entire thing.
I don't think so.
And it's not like we get to read characters like that all that often, and you definitely see how that happened. But it's interesting that even later on in life, when she still just kept super busy with the grandkids, all these things she could have probably learned to do, but like, she just didn't. So
yeah, like all the language things were interesting because like you had like one character who was fluent in both, or then you have the one character who favored Japanese over Korean, or one that like favored Korean over Japanese, or like even English. Like it was interesting to kind of see that, because especially like at this time where like that's just the first generations that this is happening. Like this sort of thing is just the very new thing, and the book it conveys that, maybe not as much because the book isn't in English, and so like sometimes they'd have stuff that you're like, you're speaking Japanese right now, because it doesn't tell you all the time when they're like speaking Japanese or something, but it did like have that like kind of hints of like, even that was kind of a thing to like add to your confusion of who you are as humans. Because like, I mean, like even the kids, they were learning Japanese because they had to speak to other kids, but then they go home and they were with a Korean family members, and their aunt spoke both, and like it had to have been very confusing. And I think that like that's an interesting level to this whole like diaspora, and like just trying to figure out who you are, because then you have like language on top of that.
And then even how like Moses favored English, and that was the one thing that he could kind of help Noah with, even though Noah was the smart one who was heavily favoring Japanese and math and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then how even the other characters like going to English class with the girlfriend and
I thought too, the like when Moses was getting married and she was like America, we need America, like let's go to America because that's where things are good in America. And he was like, nah, like I'm Japanese, like I'm not Japanese, but like Japan is my country and I can do good things here, so like I can make money and be happy here, and I'm not going to have that in America.
And on the flip
like,
side,
why would I do that? Like,
she has that for America, like she's Asian American, like, and she was having a hard time assimilating as an Asian American in Japan. And I thought that like his girlfriend, that like, even though we didn't get a lot with her, I think that was also a little like really interesting take on that too, to kind of like see that like that whole other level.
Solomon's girlfriend?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And how like she just, it was hard for her, and it broke her in a very weird, real way that we actually got to see. Because everybody else was kind of like conflicted, and the boys were kind of, you know, they would just kind of muster through like males in that like area would have. But like you actually get to see it like a little bit more of the struggle, the real like mental toll that it was taking on her. I don't know.
A lot happened.
Yeah. Is there anything else we want to like mention? Like we have been talking about it for almost an hour, so I don't know if you want to like transition into the drama now, or like is there any other like big plot points that you want to mention, or characters? No. So very quickly, do you have a rating for the book? Just so people get out of 5.
I would say like for me personally, Section 1 is like a 5 out of 5. Section 2 is like a 4 out of 5, and Section 3 is like a 2.5 out of 5. Like
I didn't even finish Section 3.
I didn't enjoy. To me, the first 2 sections narratively had more of a story being told, as opposed to the third part felt more like a collection of short stories that were connected, but I wasn't that into it. And so then when it would go into a character I didn't care about, I was like, why am I here? Like, I just go back to people I care about, you know? So that was, so it's sort of a weird, I almost feel like it is 3 books. Like it's 3 books within one. And I really enjoyed 2 of them. And one of them I went, yeah, I'm okay. I'm good. So
and Becca, to answer your question, quite a bit.
I loved her.
I loved her. I felt like she was cursed with the wrong husband.
Yeah.
I
like that, like the struggles. I like to see the opposite struggles, because she had the opposite struggles from Sunja in every single way, but they still were
besties,
friends.
They loved each other genuinely.
You just realize, like, as her story sort of unfolded, and you realize like how controlling Joseph was about like her not going out and not doing anything and not having, you know, and that you realize before Sunja came, she was literally alone all the time because she had no friends and her husband wasn't working,
allowed to do anything. Yeah.
And you're just like, oh my, you know, and like she said, if I had kids, at least there would be people around, right? There would be something that I could have done with my time. But like, they live in a like tiny little place. Like, you can only clean that so many times a day. Like, what are you going to do with yourself? That was rough.
Yeah. They supported each other through everything.
Just
And even like she was just this random girl that comes with her brother-in-law, and she immediately is like, I'm not going to look down on this girl. And it's just like, it was such a nice thing.
And it's like, and you know that she knows that ain't Isaac's baby. Like,
yes,
you
know,
like but she's never gonna be like, you hoe.
Weird about
like,
it.
She's gonna be like, we don't know what happened. Like, I'm not gonna judge you. I'm just happy to have someone to hang out with.
Needed a family.
So
needed people.
Obviously, family was very important to her, and she was cast, went to Japan, and she was loved that she had the sister. She loved that she had a child because she couldn't bear her own. I mean, like, even her husband wasn't letting her work, and she wanted to work. She was the one who wanted to make all the food. She was the one making the food. It wasn't Sunja who was doing that. Like, Sunja ends up doing it because she's the one who's allowed to be outside of the house and working between the two of them. But like, Kyung-hee was the one who was like, I want to do this and I want to be independent. And I think that was like a little...
It is one of those things, like, you see that conversation being held today, even, right, amongst people who are like, no, like, a woman's place is in the home, or like a man should be able to provide for his family or whatever, right? Which are not necessarily the same conversation, right? Like, yes, it would be nice if somebody working full time could afford to, own a home.
But like,
look at the greater picture and not like this. It's like, in a perfect world, like, he would be able to take care of the home. Except we're not. We're in war times.
Except that he clearly could not. Like he clearly could not.
You see that conversation, when you see that conversation today, you see a lot of women of color going, we never had that. Like, we never had that. We've always worked. We've always had to work. So like, and you see that contrast there with Sunja going, like, I don't even understand, because like, in my village, all the women worked. Like, they just all had jobs because that's what you do. You have to work to survive. So like, I'm going to have a job now. Bye. Like,
do you
quite
mean,
a while.
Preteen, or like, because they talk about her as when she's younger, and then teen, and then in Japan. Yeah. She's still a teen at that point because she gets pregnant at like, what, 15?
18
14?
or...
Yeah.
And she's like, like young.
It's a teeny bit skeevy the more you think about it, but we,
I mean, her mom was also young when she got married, but
they focus on the parents. So they focus on the dad, because the dad is he has visible disabilities and stuff, and they focus on him for a little bit and his family, and then focus on when he gets married, and then there's the baby, and then a little bit like when she's young, because the father dotes on her, and then most of the time I would say that like that preteen teen Sunja.
Teen Sunja is what they spend most of the time with the Korea version.
Yeah. And she moves. So everybody else's rating?
I would say probably 3.5 out of 5 if I'm going. I really enjoyed it. Like, I really liked it, like, when I was reading it. But I will retain the rest of my comments until after we talk about the drama, because then my rating will make a lot more sense once I say 3.5 out of 5. So like, that's like a pass. It's a good, solid number.
Readable, right? Like,
it was readable. It was enjoyable.
3 out of 5 or higher is very readable. It's very readable.
Well, I thought it was good.
What about you, Sky?
I would say a 4 out of 5. I do think, to me, it does. To me, it's hard to. I'm bad at rating things anyway, but it's so different than a typical book. The way it is, kind of like a historical record type thing, and so you can't be like, oh, the action scenes were really, it's not. Yeah, you can't stack it up the same as a lot of other books. So, and I will say, it feels real. Like, these do not feel like characters. They feel like real people. You feel like you're reading a biography of this person's life.
Yeah.
And so that's actually, like, that's why it's so high for me. And that's why I would recommend it to anyone that would be interested in that type of a thing. Because the way the characters are done and things, they feel realistic, but also they feel like it has the gravity of someone's life, to where I think that is a good portrayal of people that did actually live. Like, it is a very good way to honor people that did live these lives. So
yeah, cool. So for me, I really love the book. It hits everything that I love. I am extremely character driven, and this book gives me that. And I love the perspectives of everybody. I blew through it. Like I was just, I couldn't put it down. I was thinking about it when I would put it down to go do something. So I give it a pretty high. It's a 4.5 out of 5 for me. And everything, and I'm a person who loves kind of the more slice of life, mundane stuff. And I loved that. And I loved the focus being on essentially Sunja. Everything in the book points to her, everything, and the female perspective. And I loved learning little things about that time that I never would have. I think that was the most
that was really interesting. Yeah.
And it's just accumulation of everything. It's just everything that I love in a book. It's almost 500 pages, and I tore through it.
I know. When I opened the audio and it was 18 hours and 47 minutes or something.
No, I read it really quickly.
No.
No, I read it extremely quickly.
I felt it was an easy read.
Yeah, it is very,
yeah.
In terms of literature, very accessible. So if for someone who maybe struggles with reading a little bit more, I'm not saying it's written juvenilely or anyway, but it's it's an incredibly accessible book. You can read it, and
I would also say
it.
You're the type of person who depends on breaks for when you can break your reading. You need a chapter, or you need a break that will you can't just stop in the middle of a chapter or something like that. This is the book for you. Hands down, because you'll go through it'll be oh, I got another chapter, and it's not the chapter is extraordinarily long, and then it stops, and then it moves on to another character immediately, or even a year or two in the future. So it's really easy on that, if that's something that is really important to you in your reading.
And if you're, like I said, I listen to the audio. If you are somebody who struggles with the written word, and audio works better for you, the audio is very good. It's an excellent audio. Sometimes when I listen to audiobooks, the narrator doesn't pause right or whatever. You're not, it's not clear when you're getting a new chapter or when you're into something new. And this narrator was very clear.
That's cool.
They were reading the chapter titles and things, so you knew what the dates were and you knew where you were. The only thing that I struggled at all with was that I think the narrator was Japanese, so much of the Japanese pronunciations were very good, but the Korean words that they would use, she was enunciating. So ajoshi, she'd be ajioshi, because she was pronouncing the
pronouncing
E-O,
exactly as
right?
it's written. Yeah.
And it was so that some of that was a little okay, but
But at least you got the accurate Japanese.
But she did her best. So
and she was good. She had an expressive voice, and it was nice. It was nice that they had a female narrator when it was so female centric. So
it's cool. Cool. So all of us say read it. So essentially,
I guess I will say
thumbs up.
Content warning for. There are sexual scenes in it. If that's something that there's a fair bit of different versions of that. So just saying, it's not even just we get past. No, it's around.
Not super graphic, but it is graphic.
It's graphic enough.
It's graphic in a matter of fact way. It just is this is what went down. And here you go.
It's
it's not titillating.
Think about it. You're oh, okay, this is the early 1900s too. Not to say it was good at that time, but you still understood it.
It's not erotic. I think is what we're trying to say. It's just
or you're not hearing
I don't
about
want
the
you to
stories
think
of the comfort women. That's not what we're getting at.
Yeah,
I don't want you to think it's and then they had a kid magically. No, they.
They did not go to bed fully clothed and wake up in the morning pregnant.
This is the bride of the century here. You know how the kid came to be.
It wasn't just pancake kissing. There was kissing going on. So.
Yeah.
And then also, of course, violence and sadness. That is a thing.
Racism is huge. That's like the biggest thing in this. Yeah. It's really hard to hear what happened. But it's essential too.
Yeah. So. It's sort of the crux of the story, really.
Yeah.
The suffering of women, like that is the overarching theme. And they even
that's really
say that.
Listen, let's be honest. That's been the overarching theme of history. So, like
but you know, a lot of the other themes, like the author doesn't come out and like write out, like, "Hey, now we're talking about identity." Like they don't say that, but they just say the suffering of women. Like they literally talk about that periodically. It's like that's a thing.
That's right. We got some hot potatoes in the house. Hot potatoes.
I have mine over there. You can't see it.
Yeah, my light sticks are over that corner. No one flying yet, but one of these days.
Yeah. So it's a little bit harder to understand, but it's not that it's not fully there in the terms of language. Like you get like that there's differences because there are. It's just that it's when you're reading it, it's in English, and maybe they put a end of the sentence. They or like they say a little bit like hey, blah blah blah, or like
you figure it out by context clues what language people are speaking in the book. So
typically they give you just this like a one little kind of catchphrase thing. It's like they're at that kind of makes it Japanese.
Pretty
makes it.
They introduce a character and be like, this is what they like to speak in, and then they speak in that for the entire time, so then it. So it's not terrible, but
of course it is easier to pick up on that in the drama. That Absolutely. Is a huge benefit of the drama.
I was actually talking about this with my husband, how great I thought that was, that they literally color coded the subtitles so you know what language everyone's speaking.
And we will talk about this in a little bit later. So let's go on to the drama, because we have been talking about the book for an hour.
Yeah.
So the drama is kind of essentially the same as the book.
Same story.
It is a one season currently. It has been picked up for a second season, 8 episodes. It aired on Apple TV. It essentially is about the story of Sunja, who's the matriarch, and it follows her more in terms of her background's not as much. You follow more of her, and it's not done in a linear way. Yes. It is done as a dual perspective. So
Thank you, Becca.
Thank you, Becca.
Oh, thank you, Becca. Thank you for coming.
So it goes back between the present day, which is the late 80s, like 88, 89, where Solomon, the grandson of Sunja, has come back from his time spent in America, where he went to school, and he was working at the law brokerage firm, whatever it is. He's a business guy,
finance
and
finance
realty, that sort of thing. Yeah. And it
real 80s
his character and that situation, and then goes back in time in Sunja and how she got to it. It is not the same timeline as the book, and you're not getting the same amount of time with a lot of the characters. Some characters only show up in the very last episode.
So we're led to believe that perhaps they will appear more in season a dose. Yes.
But so the book came out in 2017. Apple picked up the rights to this TV series the year after, and then they went into pretty much pre-production and production within the next couple of years. And of course, pandemic wise, it stalled things, but they've been fairly consistently working on this. It was pretty much things happened. So as we said, it's presented in all the languages that are spoken in the story. So if they're speaking Japanese, they're speaking Japanese. If they're speaking English, they're speaking English. If they're speaking Korean, they're speaking Korean. And they flow throughout through the entire thing. There's a disclaimer on the show too. It's really great. So it was directed by 2 different people. The first one is I'm gonna mess up his name, Kogan Nada, who did 4 of the episodes. He did episode 1, 2, 3, and 7. His background, he doesn't have a lot of work. He does a lot of like video essays, but he is Korean who moved here to America and works in the American film space. But yeah, so like a lot of his like background is video essays on a bunch of different things and like film essays and that sort of thing. The second director is Justin Chon, who you may know if you are a fan of this little series called Twilight. He's in that. He's like more of an actor. Like, he's done a lot of like directing work, but he was one of Bella's friends at Forks. But I personally know him, and his like Pachinko's great, but like his greatest like thing that I had seen him in before all this has happened is his stint in the greatest fake K-pop boy group of all time, BGA, Boys Generally Asian. If you've never watched them, you need to. They're great.
Boys Generally Asian.
Fantastic. I was like rocking out to them beforehand. I hadn't like watched a music video in like a year or two. They're just so good. But it's nothing like Pachinko. He's really cool. He used to do vlogs. I don't know if he still does vlogs. I used to watch his vlogs a lot too. But yeah, so they are the 2 directors. Then they have the showrunner, who is the main writer in American productions, standards. Her name is Soo Hya. She's worked on The Whispers and The Killing. She's Asian American, and so she does a lot of stuff with that. So yeah, that's pretty much it that you need to know when we're going into the drama. So how did everybody enjoy? Oh, other thing, Amanda hasn't watched the drama out of all of us.
So I will have very little to say, but I am interested in hearing everything that, because I've seen people talking about it on the timeline and talking about the way that it was like the dual lines and like not understanding why they would do that way instead of just like, if you knew you were going to have multiple seasons, like the book is divided into 3 time periods, do 3 seasons and tell 3 stories, or whatever. And I'm like,
there is a
but like, I don't know, not having watched it, I can't.
There is a specific reason. I'll talk about it a little bit more in our when we talk about both of them. But yeah, so general between the 3 of us, what were your thoughts like on the drama as a whole?
I really liked the intro.
The intro was so cute.
Dancing. Oh yeah, I love it.
And like I liked how it even changed on the last episode to a different song.
Well, it was the same song, but it was in a different language.
It was a remix. Well, it was a remix too. Like it was a totally different. I understand it was the same song.
Bye, Calasandra. Thank you for coming.
It was even a different style of music.
Yeah.
Too. It wasn't just a different language. It was like a remix of the same song.
Yeah.
So
I loved the show, and I'm gonna say something bold, and you're allowed to disagree with me.
No, is that going to be in the both section though?
I mean, briefly say it, and then we can
come back to it. I think the show is better than the book. I said it. But that's just a personal thing. So you can
and then remind us, and we'll talk about it like in depth in the next section. I love the drama.
I loved the drama. I inhaled it. So I couldn't sleep because I like never sleep. And I just watched it all in a chunk, except for the last 2 episodes. And then because I did eventually have to sleep a little. But then the last 2 I watched as another. I just couldn't put it down. Just me as a little gremlin in bed with my phone, like, yes, come on, I need more. No, I loved it. I had watched the first episode when it aired, because they did a thing where they dropped 3 episodes and then the rest of the series was a weekly thing. I watched the first episode when it aired, and then I was like, you should wait.
You should wait till this is like a
this was a mistake.
This was a mistake. And then I decided to do the book club, and then I was like, well, now you have to wait because you're going to read the book first. Obviously, the book came first, and now you can so then I read the book, and then I like definitely like hardcore, just plow through the episodes. I mean, I couldn't stop. I may have been watching them while we were watching our movie in the other day.
We don't judge here. We are a judge-free zone.
I just couldn't stop. I made a point. I was like, I purposely like knew when we were going to do this, and I also wanted to like be as fresh with everything too. So like I also pushed it off, so I was like fairly close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I finished the last episode 2 hours before we started.
Yeah.
So.
I finished it yesterday, so
yeah,
fresh in the mind.
I will say, since I read the book first, I wonder if now. I don't think it would be uber confusing just watching the show as far as the jumping back and forth, because it's always very obvious. I mean, it's always very obvious which timeline you're in whenever it goes back and forth.
Yeah.
But as far as like all the characters, since you get more in depth in the book, it just helped a lot having read the book. I felt like as far as the vibes of the characters that you don't see all that much.
Except for Hana's not that big of a character in the book as she is in the.
Yeah,
like she does appear, and it is the same plot. Like it is the same progression of her life.
There's just a bit different, so she's definitely not as thing. But yeah, there's just some things that like obviously that like it worked better as a shown thing, like the languages also like was a thing. I think I just got more out of it, and the cinematography and the sets and the propness is
absolutely
just out of
stunning.
this world. So good.
The costumes,
like visually, this is like a treat. Like you watch it, and you're just like, even if I hated everything that these people were saying, I'd watch it just to watch it. You know?
Yeah, it's very, very pretty.
It's a beautiful show.
It's so good, and I think that like everybody did so well in their characters too.
I'm also like a big fan of nonlinear storytelling, which I think is probably the main reason why I prefer the show
because they
book personally. Because I actually really like sort of like movies and films that like show you how it ends up and then cuts between how the past affects the present. Like I love that shit. So
and I hate that. I hate it. Like I don't, because especially if there's something that's bad and then I get anxiety going through all the rest of it, waiting for that bad thing to happen. So like for me, even just the beginning of the first book, it was like when they sort of tell, and it was like, oh, and she's pregnant. And then they went back 6 months to like tell you how she got, and I was like, no, why are we doing it this way? I hate this. Like, so yeah.
No, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan.
Everything about it, I just really, really liked. I don't even know how to describe it. It was just so good. And there were just some things that were just so well done. And they like really, like, I know I said this in the book discussion where I was like, I don't want like you to be beating it over my head about things when like this is not my story. So I don't need to, as a white person, know these sort of things. But there were some things they did that that like were kind of like forcing it more into a global, like you don't know anything about Korea or Japan or the relations type thing, that just the way that they were able to do it was just so phenomenal. Like, and like they really affected me a lot. Like I think my major thing was the woman whose property he is trying to buy. So essentially what happens in the story, if you haven't read it or watched it, Solomon's character is hired on to help with this deal. There's a major property person who's trying to make something. I can't remember. It's like a golf course or something. And there's one plot of land that he needs, and it's owned by a Korean,
an elderly Korean lady.
Osaka. We're in Japan. And it's like a very big contentious thing because she's not wanting to sell it to the Japanese. And so Solomon comes in because he's like, I can get it because I'm Korean. This will be great. Like I'll get the like commission money. I'll like move up in the world. It would be great. Wonderful. This is like my thing. I'm going to do that. And the scene where she breaks it down for him why she can't do it and why it is just such a beautiful scene. Like I was weeping like after it. It was just like such a enormous like scene to actually show what the problem was with this and how much she had been tortured because she was just Korean living in Japan. Now she couldn't do this. And to Solomon, who in the series or in this drama series, he's hasn't actually focused on his issues with him not knowing who he was, especially because in this world he spends a lot of his time in America, and like he's very much a Western person who comes back in, and he hasn't like grappled truly with him being Korean blood, born in Japan, but moved for his formative years, his college and a lot of his working years in America. And she basically puts him in his place. And it was just that scene alone, I think, won this series for me.
Yeah.
I also like so the book doesn't really expand on like, if you're not part of the family, you don't get a backstory. And I like that they've decided to integrate very organic backstories for like, Hanzu specifically. They spend the most time on crafting his backstory, because all you get in the novel is like, yeah, I was poor on Jeju, but now I'm a rich Yakuza. Thumbs up. But in this one, it's like, it's a lot more like, you're given a lot more sort of like, though they, was invented for the show, like it's not in the source material. Like they crafted a backstory that truly makes sense for why his character in the book would be the way that he is. And let me tell you, Lee Min-ho killing it in this show. He is so excellent. Like, you occasionally see those haters. They got nothing to say. They gotta eat their words.
He's a little bit more of a villain in this, but he's still not cartoonish.
No, like he's a villain, but it's not that he's a villain. It's just
a villain as the patriarchy is a villain,
Yeah,
and like
he's
society
a product is the villain.
Of his things, especially because we get that with the earthquake. We actually get the full backstory of him. And I know that the showrunner had, when she was researching about things, she had found out about the earthquake, and it was like news to her, all the things that happened, because they show the 1910.
Yeah, I believe earthquake? If you're curious about the earthquake, I do believe it's the same one that happens in Anarchist of Colony. It's the same story.
It's the huge earthquake. It might be the biggest earthquake still ever, and it decimated through that. Not only does Min-ho's character Hansu, he has been working with an American family, like as a math tutor or something, and he's supposed to go with them to leave. Like he was supposed to go to America with them
to go to Yale. Yeah,
and then the earthquake happens, and within the earthquake, his father dies. The people he's going to America with dies. Hundreds of thousands of people die. And through that, like almost immediately, the Japanese start blaming all the Korean immigrants. It's like a huge thing in it. And it's literally why Hansu is the way that he is. Like you see that backstory, and it's just like, it's a thing that I just didn't know. Especially like I probably knew about the earthquake like at some point, and it didn't put it into memory, but like the way that like immediately Japanese were like, they caused it, like hysteria. This is like, they're all gonna come now to loot us, and like that sort of thing. It's like,
and so then of course at the time the Japanese then started just massacring Koreans
and it's
all over the
not in
place.
it's not like a big thing in history because like they refuse to like write it down, and like there's like a point where in the drama they're talking about it and how it's like nobody knows the exact amount of Koreans who died because of this, but it's thousands on top of the thousands
the people who
already
died
just perished in the earthquake. And it was just such a huge episode to kind of, especially because it's the first thing that like it's that, and then Japan goes to take over Korea. Like that's literally kind of like essentially the start of everything.
The start of that, yeah. And so if you go in and you had watched, if you had read the book, and you're like, boop, 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 this is all, you know, everything you're seeing is pretty much what was in the book. And it's like, oh, here's this episode. We're getting a huge Hansu backstory that we did not have in the book.
I loved it. But I thought it fit perfectly within like the way that the narrative of the show is sort of working. Like,
and it's like the episode 7, I think it is. So it's like late in the game. And then you kind of like, it's like you've like lived with this whole thing for such a long time. And you're like, why is everybody so like upset with Ether? Why is Japan taking over? Why are they taking all the race from all the Koreans and doing all these like terrible racist things? And then like,
and you're also, you don't understand like without this sort of context that this is providing, like, why is he the way he is? Like, why would this Korean man who desperately wants a Korean son be married to a Japanese woman and like be working with the Yakuza? Like, why would he be coming back?
Power and stuff.
Yeah, and like how would he possibly have power? Like, why? Like, he seems smart. Like, why would he, you know, be working against like, you know, his own political interests? And then you realize, like, no, this was his survival tactic.
He was there before everybody else. Like he was literally, it's not like he came to Japan after the occupation happened. He was there during the creation of it.
Yeah. And then it also like, it sort of reinforces his character in the last episode where he's talking to Noah and he says, you have to be better than everyone, not the Koreans. You have to be better than the Japanese, and they'll hate you, but they'll have to respect you. And then you realize like, that's what he had to do. And so I like that it fleshed out his character.
Little 7-year-old Noah's like, okay.
It's like, I don't know who you are or why you're talking to me.
It's like right after, so in the drama, they kind of focus more on like Isaac, like having had done anything. They don't actually show it, but like when he gets taken and jailed, you start to realize that like what he had actually done to like get jailed. And Noah is there for it because there's this like really great scene where it's when Isaac has first been jailed. Noah goes and gets the brother-in-law, comes back, and it's like Sunja, Noah, and Noah, who's like 6 or 7.
6 or 7, yeah. Like little kid.
And the brother-in-law is talking to the police officer, and he's speaking in Japanese. Sunja doesn't understand the Japanese, and Noah is translating for
as best he can.
As his hand. And it's just like he's translating everything that the guy is saying, and it's like increasingly getting worse and worse and worse. And Noah's increasingly getting like more agitated to this breaking point where like Noah's like, that's not my dad. That's not my dad. And he like freaks out about it. And it's just this like huge thing for like a 7-year-old to have to deal with. Like, this like kind of collapse already with like what's going on. And then like being the one to have to like full force into it. One of the great things about this scene is, I don't know if you were watching, Apple TV has like, there's the 2 like closed captioning systems that they have. Like, so they have the closed captioning and then there's the SDSH or whatever. There's a little bit of difference between them. I personally don't know, and I'm sorry that I don't know. But like Apple TV, at least for the English subs, they did both of them. So you could go English CC and then English SDH. Nice. I used the SDH because all the rest of the countries were translated in that. Not seen. They purposely never translated any of the Japanese
because they want you to be in her mindset.
Yeah, the brother-in-law is talking to the cop, and they're not. And then they only translate it when like Noah's talking to his mother in Korean because she's looking at what's going on. She doesn't understand anything. And it just was like, oh, so good. Like,
it was really neat that they did that. I
yeah.
really that. I will say,
Yeah, no, go.
Yeah.
So in the drama, when it comes to like the reason why Isaac got arrested and stuff, they definitely changed that up a bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
They made it like he was
like,
doing
like in the book it was almost like he accidentally was like
well,
swept
in the
up
book
in
he
some
didn't
nonsense.
do anything, right?
In the book they also focus more of
them
how
who did
there's
something.
there's almost they're not allowed to be practicing Christianity too.
Yeah.
So like the book kind of actually focuses more on the religion as part of the reason why he's in jail, because he's not supposed to be doing that.
Because even in the book it was
what.
very like you have to go to the Shinto temple still, and
Yeah,
you still have to do this
and
thing.
he wasn't doing that.
But, like not really. Like
And then the drama, I know we're like talking about both, but like in the drama, the eldest pastor and the like other person, they're not in jail with Isaac, which is different.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it makes more sense in the context of the story for the drama for it to
in terms
play
of
out the way that they
points
did.
you need, because especially with Hansu not really being the narrator of the big things that are happening, because he's not just like, he's a more active role in the drama. I think they needed that because they needed to show that was a thing that was going on in that time.
So it was pretty much Isaac, he was meeting with Japanese resistance, for lack of a better
but in sort of a bizarrely benign way. Like he was just like, hearing people's woes and like seeing like, yeah, you do deserve to be paid fairly for your work. Like, you're right. And then, so he wasn't like an agitator or anything, but I think that sort of fits very well with his character within the show.
Because he's very much, the aspect of pastoring that he liked was being a counselor to people and hearing out what they needed and stuff. But another thing is, and they say in the drama, like he split his life in two because he wanted to protect his family from possibly getting harmed by him hearing these people out. So he didn't tell anybody. And so she's having to figure out like, why did he get arrested? And so then she's of course shocked because like, no, I don't know. Like, because they're like, oh, we've heard about you. And she's like, I have no clue who you are. Like, what's going
I haven't
on?
heard about you. Yeah.
And it's because he purposefully tried, And
there's this like really great scene where you start to see him start to like really focus on wanting to have some pride in who he was and being Korean. And that's he's goes to get his brother from a pub or bar or whatever. And this is when Sunja's giving birth to Noah. And he goes because it's after they had given like, the money to the people and like,
paid off the loan, all that stuff.
Being a mad, male, that sort of thing. And all the people in the pub are dancing and like their Koreans just like gathered and being prideful of who they are and being prideful of things. And they're broken. It's broken when the Japanese officers come in and start to like harass everybody and that sort of thing. And that's like his breaking point of like you seeing him be like, no, this is like my calling in life is to be true to who I was. Like I am a Korean. Just because I'm in Japan, that doesn't mean that I'm not Korean.
Yeah.
Not that it's exactly the same, but it kind of reminds me of the part in Titanic when they're all dancing. Like, it's that same like thing, because it's like definitely in Titanic, it's them dancing and being prideful of like who they are is no matter if they're like third class or not, and that sort of thing.
Having joy for a second in their second lives. Like, here's a safe place where we can be.
Yeah,
you're right.
And wanting to keep that, like wanting to make a place for the future for him and now his future children. And I think that like having his second son really just solidified that goal for him in terms of the drama. So it was like definitely an interesting take on it, but it was like something that I think they needed, especially in the drama.
Yeah. And there was one other big difference, like as far as there was something else in the drama that was more drawn out, and I can't really remember what it was off the top of my head, but it was more like, oh, they made this a bigger deal within the drama. I don't know what it was.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, Hana's character, as far as how it was portrayed.
So do we want to like stop talking about the drama and actually go into like things, because it's a little bit hard to
well,
it's a little bit harder to like.
The one thing I did want to say while we were recording was I didn't know that it was like gonna the season, like the whole story wasn't gonna get told in the 8 episodes.
You didn't know there was a second season.
Well, I mean, like
along about episode 4 and 5, I'm like, wait, the rate at which we're doing these events, this is not gonna work.
Yeah, like you're like, I haven't seen like any like Noah even like being like a baby. And he's like got a significant like backstory. Okay.
You know, like the Solomon
she hasn't even become an entrepreneur yet, and we're like almost at the end of the show.
Well, let's do this because it's obviously harder than we had realized to like separate the two. So Natalia, you loved this show. You thought it was great.
Thought it was fantastic.
What rating do you give it?
9.5 out of 10, baby.
Okay.
Almost perfect. But
and then Sky, what do you give it?
I mean, I think it's perfect for what it like.
Okay. Yeah, I also would agree. It's like a 9.5 out of 10 for me. I thought it was like perfect. I definitely suggest anybody watch it. I literally told my mom to watch it, like, and I've heard amazing things about it. Like everybody, I mean, like even on Rotten Tomatoes is at a 98%. Like it's probably going to be on top list of every person who's into TV.
You better be winning them awards, baby.
Doubt it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so they haven't said if it was only going to be the 2, but the showrunner did say that she had written it as a multi-season. If that multi-season is only 2, yes, I kind of feel like not, but
I feel like at least 3.
It feels like the kind of thing like where they should know and commit. You know what I mean? Like
that would be
like
nice.
be committed to it's going to be 3 seasons because you have this source material that's so beloved.
Okay,
like
so plan 4, I could see 4.
Get the whole story.
Also, hi, Lucy.
Sure you're getting the whole story, right?
Thank you for coming.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Lucy. One of us.
So let's just like officially say we're going to go into spoilers for both the book and the drama right now. So if that's something you don't want, like, we love you. We understand.
See?
This will be up for later. Okay.
Come back when you finish the show.
Sorry,
bye.
we couldn't differentiate them as much.
I want to bring up a comment from earlier. So the comment is, another part of the series I love is the food porn. And these moments, like the rice for the Sunja wedding feast and old Sunja cooking rice for Solomon, are they as impactful in the book? In the book, it's not as focused on it, but they still did use rice as a device a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes. It's kind of more of like you are told that it's hard to get because the Japanese are eating it all and you're not allowed to get it. And so there is that scene where the mother of Sunja goes to get the rice from the grain guy.
For the wedding.
So that's like a big
begs,
thing.
Like she's has to plead with him.
I would say like they talk about rights a little bit, but I would say more of the importance food that comes out of the book that is not that important. Like you see it at the very end of the series, is kimchi, because there's a whole story in the book where so Kyung-hee has been wanting to make food. Like her goal would be, in a perfect world, she would be making this food and like selling it and that sort of thing. And through what you find out is Hansu's doing. They get like a job at a restaurant in town to sell kimchi to the restaurant. So they make the kimchi and then leave, and then the restaurant uses it. So the kimchi is actually like the most important in terms of like food. Other things happen because they talk about more in the book when everything that like is in kimchi starts to just like not be a thing, because like you start to get into like really like struggles of war where it's like not even that like it's hard to get, it's like the
Bye.
but like you get into like there's just not, it's not there because they can't produce it, because it's just like farmers are dying or like they're being bombed and that sort of thing. So like the rice thing is not as big in the book as it is, or in the drama as it is.
And the kimchi thing too, the whole concept of them being smelly because of their smelly fermented foods and, you know, stuff like that, like, and being seen as like the dirty, smelly foreigners because they smell sour because of their, you know, fermented foods and stuff too, which I you know, I hear that stuff about, you know, from kids who come here, right? Like when they bring their packed lunches and then they get told it's too stinky for the classroom or whatever, right? So
I mean, they definitely talk about that too. Like the garlic is big and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to mention, so if you read the acknowledgments after the book, Minjin Lee's talks about like her motivation for writing the book and her actual motivation. So is it Miyazaki, the best friend to who to the, what's his name,
to Moses,
Solomon's father, Moses. Like in the brief time that he's actually in school, who ends up being a police officer, there's a point in the book where he ends up meeting with a Korean couple whose son has committed suicide because the Japanese have written really terrible things in his yearbook that it was a real event. She read that, and that's the basis of her writing this entire book, was after she read that, she wanted to do something that was like a thing. So that was like kind of the stem of it. And you see that a lot because you see the amount of racism that
nonsense
happens.
And then what I liked about the book, which I'm sure this will get into in the show as well, just because of the way the show's progressing, is that you get the sense of like there's like a real divide between just, you know, everyday Japanese people and the actions of the Japanese government, and like that, just like these average Japanese people don't realize like a lot of stuff happening. And I think it's especially shown with Moses's girlfriend later on in the show, when they have to take Solomon to get like, you know, permission to stay in the country at 13, and she's so upset about this.
You mean in the book?
She's like, in the book, because she's like, why does he have to get permission? He was born here, like he grew up here. And then, you know, Moses is like, no, like it's fine, like don't worry about it. And she's like, no, it's not fine. And so you can like, there's sort of a sense that like a lot of this stuff that was happening would be hidden from people who wouldn't know any better.
Because they would just, like it would be like, no, all of Japan like wants them out. But like there's other, and then also the book like has a lot of like the dealings of like, you know, a Korean and a Japanese marrying and then producing a kid. So like you have that kind of like other sense of like, this is another thing that's like an issue. And sometimes it works out because like, looks wise they seem more Japanese so they can get away with it, but like it's still a major thing. So like the biggest thing in terms of both the book and the drama is obviously the timeline is completely different. So you have the linear versus the dual back and forth. And then I read this specific thing about like, or not read it, I watched it. I watched a little clip where the showrunner was talking about like why she chose to do the way that she adapted the story, and she was talking about how she wanted to focus a lot on generations in the book or in the drama, and how she didn't want this to be like a historical Korean drama. And she specifically said, and this is like what makes you understand exactly the reasons why they did what they did with the drama. And she said that she wanted to focus on the sacrifices of the first generation and the burden that it becomes for the third generation.
Yeah.
And which is exactly why you have Solomon being such a major character in the retelling of this story, because he is that third generation, and he is now trying to deal with the burdens, even if he doesn't understand it, which then you start to the scene where he's with the woman the realtor woman who in the book, it's not as it's big, but it's not as big as it is in the drama. She's the one that passes away, and then they think it's, the dad, because there's a whole story doesn't happen in the drama.
Doesn't happen in the drama.
The dad is never connected to like him getting that deal. Like he comes straight from America having the deal already, like, and that's a big thing. But like, so like the burden of that third generation, and he not even understanding that he has the burden, and the burden being presented to him when the woman is talking about what happened with her and her friends and everything that happened with the dealings of being it. And that's why she can't go on good faith to, make this deal happen, because it would be just a decimation of her as a character, as her as a Korean, and that he needed to understand it. And like that scene is just so much more impactful than it ever is in the book, especially, I mean, like Solomon's not as big of a character in the book and the drama, but like, just like him then going directly from, they get out of the meeting, everybody's yelling at him in Japanese and English, and like, everybody's just like railing on him because he's essentially like told her, no, don't take this deal. Like he's essentially like finally comes to terms a bit with like what his grandma had to deal with. And then he just like goes and runs out in the streets of Osaka, and he like sees this like group, busking on the street, and he's just dancing in the rain. And it's just such that like just juxtaposed with like the grandma, because in the drama, the grandma Sunja comes to Korea, like there, there's this like point, there's this juxtaposition where she like sees the water for the first time, because they focus a lot on her having started to do the diving and when she's younger, and like so she starts to walk into the water, and it's like raining and water and stuff, and it's just the juxtaposition of those two characters doing that same thing. It's just like it's so impactful when you watch it on screen. It's just so good. Like it just, and it's something you can't do in the book. You just can't, especially if you're like me reading it. That's not something I can ever like in my head make, because it's not my history. Like I don't have that as like a thing. I mean, like even like generations of like Korean Americans now probably don't have that as well. Like.
And then when what were you gonna say?
Oh, I said then they pull in my girl Kim Young Ok showing up for a cameo there. Hell yeah! I was like, no. I love her. She's in everything, but I love her in everything, regardless. Playing her only Korean friend who still survived.
She's one of the girls.
One of the servant
One
girls.
of the sisters.
One of the
the
servant sisters.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so then she pretty much gives the timeline. After you left, this is what your mom went through, and then we left, and this is how it affected my sister. Like,
that's cool.
But that she still like loved them enough to like make sure the father's grave got moved. And it's just like,
it was.
Aww.
And being able to watch Sunja Sunja and Moses both go back to her hometown, and she goes to the fish market, and so she was experiencing it as she did when she was younger, when she used to go with her dad and by herself. And you could tell she was just reliving all of that and how she would smile.
Like, the smells of everything, the way that like happened. I mean, like even like just memories of like her as a younger child just being there.
And then and another aspect of the drama that was different was you see Kyung Hee as an older woman, like they're all living together in Moses's house and all this stuff, and then she passes away, and so then they take her ashes to their, and spreads them out in the ocean and stuff.
In the drama, Kyung-hee kind of replaces the mom. The mom never, you don't see Sungja's mom ever. And she kind of like replaces that. So like her death and stuff. But it's just, it's really impactful because she's like, finally, like, she's like, no, Kyung-hee needs to go back home.
Yeah.
Because there's like a point where she's like, no, that's fine. We're here. This is like our life. But then she kind of is like, no, this is how it is. One of the things that I'm not going to say that I definitely disliked, but I think it kind of had a disservice to the show is, what's her name? So Naomi was the co-worker of Solomon in the firm, and I like her character because her character is definitely an older female, and so it was like a perspective of that, but she replaces Solomon's girlfriend, Phoebe, the Asian American. So you never get that focus. Like they kind of like do more of like the like Western side of things, like more in Solomon's character, honestly, because he speaks the most English. He like does that things. Lucy, you definitely need to read the book. It's fantastic. Yeah. But like, it's not that it's a disservice. I kind of like wish they had both. But like, I liked her character. I suck at names. Naomi's character, because of the way that they presented her in terms of like her being a female in the company. She's Japanese, and they have like a moment where they're talking to each other. And they're talking about like, like going to America and being in America and being like, okay, what did they think you were? Like, and they like, like, and
it's always
about like how he's like, I get really lucky if I'm the fourth option. Korean's the fourth option. Sometimes I just say Japan just to like not have to deal with it. And so like, there's like some bonding moments in between them, and they never like actually make her like the girlfriend. They never have like a relationship, but like she sees his kind of growth and like a place that I think she kind of has already gotten there with her culture a little bit more. But like they kind of like hint towards like she's not a major character that we ever see more of, but like she's always there to like understand. And then the what spurs on that is the biggest thing is that Hannah is a huge character in the drama, like surprising, like huge characters. You see her a lot.
I think it makes a lot more sense since they're focusing on Solomon that they would have to also bring Hannah in as a much like larger character.
AIDS Hannah is like the biggest thing because she does have AIDS in the book, but a lot of the time you see it, it's like the sexual awakening of both of them, like essentially. You don't see any of that in the show yet. Yeah, who knows?
There was no flashback to that so far.
There was allusions to it, but not direct telling.
Yeah, like, and she kind of is the like character is like always reminding him like, yeah, Japan sucks a lot. Like, do you not remember like the one time we were in the convenience store and then I did stuff and
you got blamed for it.
He like. There's like a scene where like, so like she did stuff. The shopkeeper saw that she did stuff. She's Japanese. So he pushed her out of the like shop, locked the door, and then was like, hey, the Korean did this. Like, and like, it was like, like real moments of like the racism and that. And she's just banging on the door and stuff. But like, it was also him just like, she was his favorite person, and so like they deal a lot with like trying to find her, and then he finally finds her, and then she is dying of AIDS, of this like real thing that he can't like control, which is interesting. It's like an interesting thing. I do think like in the book, one of my like favorite moments is when Solomon finds Hannah. And first time he goes to talk to her in the hospital, she talks about how the nurses are treating her terribly. Like they're not like touching her. They're like, like looking at her weird and that sort of thing. But Kyung-hee and Sunja kept on coming and dressing her wounds and stuff, and that was just like such a sweet moment. But it's not really a moment in the drama because Sunja's just like she's dressing her wounds and doing stuff, but like she's just there. Like it's not like a hey, did you know that your like grandma and whatever
great aunt
like it's been doing this stuff. It's like not like a epiphany of like women looking after
take care
women,
of women
no matter what. Like
even because they because Hannah believed even in the book that they hated her and she was just like, but they still come and it doesn't matter if I'm mean to them or they come and they take care of me when no one else will.
And Sunja just like takes care of Kyung-hee's passed away at this point, so she's not there. But like she takes care of her, but it's not like
it feels like
a
good kind of bookend too to the start with Isaac being sick and them looking after him, even though they could have gotten sick. This is just what you do. There's a person here and they need our help. So I just
in the drama they spend no time. Like honestly, that's probably one of the, like the worst parts about this drama. It's like they spend no time. It's like you find Isaac passed out on the floor and then all of a sudden they're like getting married and there's like really no time.
Yeah, it was
there's no time you actually get like the sense of her actually helping him because they literally spend no time on it whatsoever.
It felt like it was overnight, literally. Like
like you don't get like in the book you understand that like he's also doing it for the mother as well and how they like treated. Not in the drama. Is like passed out. One time they bring him in and then he's like she's obviously pregnant.
He's overhearing about her pregnancy and is like
that's it.
Because like in the book it's like he goes to see the pastor in town and he's like, man, we expected you here months ago. What happened? And he's like, I got here months ago, but like I've been sick.
Works on building up his strength and has to get, the neighbors help, like all these things. No, we just plowed right on through all.
It's like, we don't need to spend time on this.
Okay, now I understand why some of what I was seeing in the timeline when the show was airing was justice for Isaac hashtags where people were like,
Isaac's not dead yet.
No, he's still alive at the end of this drama.
It does
like
really
this
great,
season.
like very impactful because it's like there's a scene of like Isaac getting put into the car to like I guess leave for their jail or whatever, and Noah sees him and starts running after the car, and it's just like that's kind of towards the end of that episode is like Isaac leaving, so he's not dead. He just got into actual prison.
I mean, book wise, most of Isaac's story is that part, like, right? Like it's Korea and that whole thing.
If they stay true to it, we won't see a heck ton of Isaac.
No, I feel like our time with Isaac, as handsome and wonderful as he is, may be drawing to a close.
I just saw that the actor is potentially in a drama soon. So
yes,
he has model vibes. Is he a model? Because
he is a model. He is a model.
He reminds me of what's his face from Tomorrow. Like he has that structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just has
you
it.
mean
So, like
you mean my hall pass? Yes.
That's funny.
No, Isaac, Chef's a very handsome man. Hope to see him again soon.
Asian Wiki, help me out. So
yes, Lucy.
Yes, Lucy.
Yes, Lucy.
Come on, show me Isaac. There's so many characters. Okay, it's Noah Song-hyun is the actor. He's in Bloody Romance this year. He's been in Money, New, Old, and Bad Man, which are 3 movies. So the girl who plays young Sunja is Kim Min-ah. And I thought she was
fantastic.
Oh yeah.
She also speaks fluent English. So she's on a ton of interviews if you're like looking for that.
Ooh.
Yes. You may know her. She was in School 2017 and Partners for Justice.
Mm-hmm.
She was also in The Call, but she was just a young character, which you kind of see a lot. But Call's really good. It's a good thriller.
Yeah, it's a really good. It's
and
quite
after
a good thriller.
it's on Netflix as well. But she's not. She's like the main character, but like the young version of the main character. So she's relatively brand new character, and I thought she was fantastic as the teen Sunja, who you see for the most part. So her through meeting Hansu and having the baby and to what we see at the end of the series, because she hasn't progressed since that. She's fantastic. In one of the interviews, she was talking about how she specifically talked to her grandmother. Her grandmother's like 95 years old, so squarely in this age range. And her grandmother told her that she was really proud and happy that she was being able to do this role, but also really sad because now she'll know the actual true things that happened, which was just like, oh.
Another thing that I really enjoyed was the post credits on the last episode. Oh, thank you, Lucy. The post credits on the last episode where they actually talk to actual Korean women who have lived in Japan their whole lives, and it was just and they had like pictures of them as young women,
95,
like,
98,
like 100-year-old, like.
So what I really like about that, like so it is an open ending. Obviously, like Noah's not even 7. Like you don't get any of Noah's character. You barely get any of his brother. You get him as like a grown adult, but like you don't actually get much of the Pachinko business as well. That's like not a like very big thing. You see a lot of characters. Some of the characters are completely different. Like the friend from who's Japanese guy who becomes a cop. He's not even a cop. He's like a different character altogether that Solomon sees at one point when he's trying to find Hana. But the way that they kind of end up. Oh, someone's not happy.
Excuse me 1 second.
But the way that they end the show, it's very like open ending, but not like terrible cliffhanger. And so what they do is they kind of like end it as Sunja's going to the market to start to sell the kimchi. And she meets up with the meat guy, like that one.
By the way, in that moment, I audibly was like, "Oh!" And I had of course read it in the book, but the moment on the drama, the way she was struggling to find a place,
and
her first day trying to sell kim, and people were just being awful, and the Japanese butcher guy was just like, "Come here, young woman!" Like. Set up shop right beside me, and I was like,
he's like, your kimchi is not smellier than my dead animals, so like it's fine.
But the way that it does it, so it like is Sunja taking control of helping the family with like finances and the females doing that, and then they immediately go into the real stories of these Korean women in Japan and like how they dealt with stuff and that sort of thing. And it's like, I don't know, 10 minutes of the last episode with them, which is a really nice touch.
Yeah. I thought that was really like, because then it grounds the series that you just saw in reality, where it's like, no, these aren't fictional characters. This is a fictional story, but this was real people,
And then even, I mean, it's just heartbreaking because it wasn't a long segment, but it was very impactful the way they had edited it, and they really just kept some good stuff in. And then one of them was very like, I've been through so much hard stuff in my life. I know that I come across as like not friendly to people around me, and I'm aware of that, but I've been through so much that's just my life. Like I can't be different than that,
Yeah.
And it's like, and imagine if you were just meeting her in person. You don't know her past. You just think, oh, crabby old lady, right? Crabby old Ajima, whatever. But like, you don't know what someone has been through. And she was like 95. Like she's been through a heck ton of stuff.
Yeah.
I love the show. I can't wait for season 2. I think it's excellent, and just gonna reiterate, I liked it more than the book.
I wish it wasn't on Apple. Like I wish it was.
It's like
more widely out there.
I wish it wasn't, but Apple's trying to be the best option in actual like quality series. Where you're gonna get like focused on quality like series. That there's, especially with Coda having won so much, and Coda was on Apple. Apple is kind of priming themselves, at least what it looks like on the outside, as being more about quality instead of like the quantity. And they're not like doing what like all the other platforms are doing. So like in a way, like I don't like that, like it's not like Netflix where everybody has it and you have to pick up the series or whatever. But on the other hand, I like feel good about it being on Apple.
Yeah. It's going to be well done.
At least it is offered to North America.
That's true. Like, and it, I mean, like, I didn't even like keep up with, like, I didn't look to see how many different options on countries, but it's a huge amount. And that like SDH thing does that thing where like, if it's a background noise, it's in white. If it's a character, they're in a different color. Then another character speaking, they'll like put it in a different color. And it's like, so visually.
Yeah, I really enjoyed how it was like, if it was in
and
English,
there's a dub.
White. If it
I know there's a dub.
Yeah, for people who can't do subtitles, there is a dub.
But yeah, it's.
I know that was when they first announced some of the casting, that was a concern because people assumed like the book is in English, so they assumed it was going to be in English, like in English, that the series was going to be in English. So they were sort of like, I didn't think that actor spoke English that well. Like
psych.
And it was like, nope. It makes way more sense. It's like, to me, yeah, if you're going to tell a story about Koreans in Japan, like you're going to hire Koreans and Japanese.
I'm going to
tell the story
anything that like way. Really just makes it much more like the drama, like so like more than the book. It's that the languages and them keeping the languages, like, because they keep it for every single character. Like even his American boss, when he's dealing with the Japanese, he knows Japanese. And they even like kind of even like talk about him in terms of this is kind of his like last hope international spot. And then his like kind of issue of like being there as the only American and then having to like learn language and stuff. Like they briefly talk about that. So it's like, it's not all about his like issues, but it's like it shows another person trying to find their identity. And I mean, like there's this the moment where the Solomon and the girl are speaking in English too. Like they don't always speak to each other in Japanese. Like it's just so much more impactful that they kept it up, and it was like such a specific thing that they did. And it was a specific thing that they did because it literally is like a thing that they show every single time he like starts the episode. This is in the originals, in their original speaking like their language. It's going to be in that language, so put on a closed caption. And they say, I mean, like, even when they do, like...
That's cool that it's on there, because I might have watched not...
No, it says it's in its original language, Japanese and Korean. Turn on the closed captioning to
or
see
choose
this.
a dub.
Yeah. And then when it would do stuff like... when it was, like, traveling through... Because it travels a little bit through time for Sunja's, like, span, when it would go to another year or something, or go back to the like present day Osaka or whatever, it would like have like it would say like Osaka, and then it would have it in Japanese and Korean, like
boom
everything.
Boom.
And then they did the thing that we talked about earlier, where it was like if the person wasn't supposed to understand what was happening, they didn't
translate it.
There was like one part where like it just said speaking Japanese, and it didn't do that like as like a normal thing that like these subtitles do. It was specific because the people who you were like around. I think it was even the scene where Sunja was in the restaurant with Isaac, and so everybody's speaking Japanese, and so like she's not supposed to understand it, so it's like no, she's not going to understand it. But if someone does understand it, then they're gonna like hear it. It's not like you get all the Japanese is like only like not subbed. It just changes within who's speaking, and I think that was just such a beautiful touch to it.
Cool.
So yeah,
I look forward to season 2.
Me too. Very much so. Very much so.
And it kind of looks like I noticed on the cover of the book. It looks like this was a book of the month thing. BOTM, I would assume that's what that meant. So I hope that a lot of people are reading the book because of that.
Do you think that you're specific to your library? Is that a library copy?
This is a library copy.
Does your library have a book of the month? Do you think that's
yeah, but it's not. I mean, it's not a specific sticker to my library.
Okay.
Like it's on the cover. Like
I could see. So what is? I think.
Well, I mean, it's a wildly popular
2017,
book.
I think it was in the top 10 on the New York Times as best books of the year.
Natalia flashes the e-copy.
Yes. I think, does it have it? I mean, I guess it depends on when this was done.
I mean, that was one of the things that, like, I remember hearing about it so much.
Yeah, I remember,
like, not really knowing what it was about or anything, but like,
what's
not
hilarious?
even just in the Asian drama circles. Like, people were talking about Pachinko.
Just to remember, it came out and was really popular. And I was about to read it, but I just never got a copy of it when I was at my parents' house during our last book club. That's when like it came out. Or like when it was like really popular. I remember I was like, oh, I'm gonna read that, and then I didn't because I just didn't get the book, and I was in different.
There you go. It's there. It's there.
So yeah, like who else? Okay, so like we talked about Kim and Lee Min-ho. Yona Jung plays this, Sangja as old. Jin Ha is Solomon. He
did such a good job, by the way. Oh my gosh.
His birthplace is South Korea, but he's definitely
American raised.
So his father is played by Japanese actor Soji Arai, who was in the Ramen Girl, the movie. So Naomi is played by Anna Sawai, or I'm butchering her name. I'm sorry. But she is New Zealand born, but she's Japanese. But she was also, I looked her up because I was like, I'm very interested in her. She was in a Japanese girl group. So she's I think in 2013. Our resident American is Jimmy Simpson, who
I like him. He shows up in like just TV stuff, and I actually like that actor. When I saw him, I was like, that guy. He's one of those like that guy,
I mean, like everybody's like, it's so drastic. Like it's like not a lot of people, like it's Japanese actors, it's Korean actors. Let's see, Sunja as a child. The child actor is Yuna. She was the Sinner's daughter in Hellbound. And she's also in Green Mothers Club right now. But she was also in Student Nature 8, Stone Skipping, and she'll be in Dirty Money as the movies. But she was great as the young child. Like, the cast is so good. Idol Manager strikes again.
Oh, don't worry, Lucy. Idol Manager will be back.
I mean, like, there are times where, like, it was, like, a little, like, a random guy, and you're like, oh, I know you.
Yeah.
You're character actor I know.
And I'm like
the guy who played...
is like
the guy who played...
and you're like,
the guy who played Lee Min-ho's father, I was like, that guy,
That guy.
Oh, yeah, like, that guy.
Oh, it's
and then even Joseph
Woong In, who is in everything, like everything. He's just in Rose Mansion, Idol the Coup, Delayed Justice. Chief of Staff. Like him. What's the other one that I was thinking of? I was like, oh, I know that person.
But Pachinko, I would highly recommend just across the board. Like, it's really well done.
Oh, the actor who played Joseph was in Be Melodramatic too.
Yeah, it's a
like, just
the
going
cast is huge.
Like, I recognize these people, you know.
And there's obviously a ton of like resources in terms of interviews and stuff with everyone because, you know, I would say 80% of the cast speaks English, so it's a little bit easier to do that, obviously. But it was such a big thing, and it's Apple, so like they have a little bit more in terms of like they're going around. And the showrunner talks a bunch about like what she like tried to do with the show and why she picked the things that she wanted to pick. And she specifically said she didn't even know who Lee Min-ho was before she got it.
Yeah,
And
she knows now, baby.
Yeah, I know. She's like, now she knows. But like, there's a big thing that like everybody had to audition, every single person. So Lee Min-ho had to audition, and they talk about it because it's like a big thing that everyone's like, well, you haven't had to audition for a role in like a decade or whatever. Like everybody's like really into that like talking point, like especially American like interviewees. They're like, oh. And he talks about how he was like, he liked it because he loved the role so much and he respected the work so much that he was willing to do anything, and it wasn't like he didn't feel burdened by it or anything like that. He thought it was like perfectly great and wonderful, and he was really excited to be able to be producing the thing. And the main girl who plays Sunja, it's the teens, she was on a couple of like the late night shows and stuff like that. So you can find like a lot of like extra things on this, especially because it's being picked up a lot by Western people, especially the like, there's that like side of people who like TV, like they're picking it up,
Yeah.
It's not just like the Netflix people who found Squid Game. It's like the the TV people, so they're watching anything that's coming out of these things. So
I would imagine there's like the book people too, right? Like it was a big popular book in English. I wonder how many people who would who maybe would never have watched something subtitled, not regularly anyway, have watched this or are planning to watch it because they really enjoyed the book. So
well, we'll see.
I wonder.
Maybe we'll get another wave of new K-drama fans. Who knows?
It's definitely such a unique story as far as the expanse of it and the topics that are being covered and stuff, to where, sometimes you have 5 rom-coms that are very similar to each other. So it's not like someone would want to subscribe to Apple TV just to go seek out a rom-com story or something that they might have, because they're kind of similar. But this is so unique that it's like someone would maybe be like, oh heck, I liked the book, I'm gonna go,
I think Apple TV really is in that like realm of people are going out of their way to subscribe to us because of like Coda, and they have a couple of other TV series that have done well. This isn't their first K-drama on the service. They have Dr. Brain as well. So if like maybe that's like a point, I don't know if there's like a freebie trial of Apple TV probably at some point, right? Or if you're thinking about it, like maybe like now that it's like completely done, and it's probably going to be a while before the second season happens, because it's got to be like obviously like probably a year of production and stuff. But if you are thinking about like maybe is this a thing that I want to spend money on for a month, you could watch Pachinko and Dr. Brain. Dr. Brain I think was only like 6 or 8 episodes too, so you could watch those both and feel like confident. I like personally would go ahead and do it. Like I wouldn't say no to someone doing that to watch it, because I think Pachinko was just so good and so beautiful. And I think especially now I feel like there's like this wave of wanting to hear truly everybody else's story in entertainment right now, and I think that's what making Pachinko work. And like I keep on bringing Coda up, but like I think Coda also is in that realm where like you just want to hear other people's stories, and I think that's why it's working really well for everybody. And I think that it'd be something you could watch with like non-Asian drama people and be fine with.
Cool.
So what's our final rating for?
Thumbs up, baby.
Thumbs up. Just watch it.
Just thumbs up. Just watch it. You'll like it.
Highly recommend both.
Yes,
if I had to pick one, like if someone only had time for one,
drama. I've made myself clear at the onset of this.
I think I like them both the same amount. I don't think I could pick.
But I like
just...
the styling. The style of the book is such an easy read for the size of book that it is.
I would honestly, I don't know. Like, they're also just so different in a way that I think is one of the best examples of how you can adapt a book. I think that's like the big thing about this.
It's stuck to the spirit of the book.
Do I think that like you should read the book beforehand? I don't know, because then you'll be like, well, I know what's going to happen, and we haven't even touched on everything that's happening in the book.
Yeah.
But like there are some other things in the book that I like. I think that's like really cool that we don't ever get to see, and we won't get to see. Like, we don't spend a lot of time with her in Korea when she's younger. That we'll never get back unless they do a flashback, but I don't think they'll ever do that.
Well, and that's an aspect of the book I really appreciated. Like, even the backstory of her family and the struggle of her dad, and like the type of person that her dad was, because and how that affected her as a person.
She says it in the drama. She only says that he's like got these issues that would make her like potentially not marriageable or whatever. She mentioned it, but physically the actor doesn't display any of those that you have in the book, because the book mentions, you know, how he has the like the cleft lip or whatever in the
they did try to make up it. I mean,
they did, but it's not a thing until like she talks about it in the like restaurant, and that's it. Like so it's not a thing we get. It is kind of fun. Like, to me, it's fun when you're like, okay, who's that? And then they say who it is, and you're like, oh, it's that person. That's so cool. You know, seeing them versus what you have in their head. It's like,
that's, you know, like, it was super fun having read the book and then experiencing, like, meeting the servant, you know, the servant girl as an old woman. Like, I was like, like, I was freaking out with that. I was like, yay, we get to see her, because in the book,
that
never hear from her again.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess both. Maybe I recommend both. Do both.
Yeah, do both. It's they're both beautiful.
The book really, for the size of the book, it really doesn't take that long to read. So
it's an easy. It's
a quick read.
Like, language wise, it's an easy read.
Yeah. I mean, like, even like in terms like we can. So I think it's like 488 or something pages, but I don't know if we'll be able to see it. It's fairly large font, so that should also be a thing. I think in terms of like more about females, the book wins.
Yeah, because less emphasis on Solomon that way.
Because there's even like I forgot I had like put this thing. There's like a point in the book where Sunja is talking to Kyung-hee about things, and they're talking about like Goseng, it's the woman's lot to suffer. And all her life, Sunja had heard this sentiment from other women that they must suffer as a girl, suffer as a wife, suffer as a mother, die suffering. Goseng, the word made her sick. What else was there besides this? And then it talks about like being a mother and stuff too, which the drama does. It just hasn't had a lot of time with it kids.
Quite much.
That's the big thing, you know. Yeah, I mean, like, I definitely
the book feels more female centric for sure. That is very true.
But it definitely sounds like, listening to you guys talk about it too, that you could go either way. Like, if you watched the show first, you might in some ways get more enjoyment, because you wouldn't be wondering when, like, how are they going to tell these stories? When are they going to get to this stuff? You wouldn't be feeling like you were missing it. You would just watch it, and then if you read afterwards, you'd be like, oh, like,
I think it definitely depends on the person too. I will say that they do start off so differently that I don't think I ever had an issue, like a true issue with them diverting with a lot of stuff. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I literally read the book, then started the rest of the drama. Yeah. So it wasn't like there was time in between, but that also could just be me not being a thing. Yeah.
I mean, I
probably didn't even spend 5 hours on this book, like easily.
Watch the movie first, right? Because if I watch the movie first, I can enjoy the movie, and then read the book, and I'll enjoy the book. But if I read the book first, I might like watch the movie and be like,
too critical.
Yeah, like sometimes it's hard. Not always. Usually I'm pretty good, chill about stuff. Like I've been in theaters where people are like, you can hear people going, like, her motorcycle is supposed to be brown, not black. Like, are you kidding me? Stop it.
You're like, shut
up. I will say, Hansu, I love more in the book than I do in the drama. I don't think he's terrible in the drama, but the way that he's so interesting to me is not presented in the drama because you get more about him. He's not who he is, but it's not a bad thing. Like he's just a character now. Like I bet, it I guess it's different. Like whatever you want, but I didn't feel like so cheated when I watched drama versus the book when they're different, because I mean, like the Solomon character, the storyline was huge. Like that alone, the way that they set it up is drastic. But then again, you don't get that beautiful moment with the woman who owns that property in the book. And that would be that, like, alone to me would be sad.
It sounds like both is the right answer.
Yeah, I think
I'm the same, Lucy.
I like to see the adaptation.
I would say I think the drama, because of the dual storylines and stuff, I would not say that I felt depressingly sad throughout the entire thing, because the tone shifts a little bit more because of the different things that you're seeing. There's more levels to it, whereas when you are literally living through her suffering, it's a different
almost
experience.
goes this way. Like it felt like it got more and more. Yeah, like it got more depressing, and that was kind of why I stopped like halfway through the third section, because I was just like, I just can't right now. Like this is just too much for me. I'm out. So like,
and it's not like the drama had you had kind of the breaks and stuff. It provided some of it's not like haha tee hee, we have a joke. No. But it's the way you're telling two separate stories. It kind of helped that.
I guess what we have to do is when the 4th season ends and the whole series ends, then we'll do an actual wrap up of this series, and we'll actually do a drama review. Which I'm sorry about. We couldn't do the drama review without like talking about the books, but that's okay. I'm sorry, but like also
it be what it be.
This was our book club, so I guess in terms of things, we have to be like focusing on the book more. But
and grab it. If you don't want to buy it, grab it at the library.
Yeah. I mean, like I could foresee it being a little bit harder to pick up now that it's on Apple TV, but. I mean, like, I bought this because I had a Target gift card, and it was fairly cheap, and it's a hardback. And I'm pretty sure it was exactly the same price as Amazon, and I try not to purchase from Amazon, even though Target's not the best, but, like, it does the butterfly in it is...
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, that's pretty.
You definitely don't get the Pachinko stuff in the drama like you do the book too.
The title doesn't make as much sense.
It's not really to that point yet, though, right?
That's true.
It hasn't.
I think with like Pachinko, it's like a twofold thing in terms of like what it means to the title, and then just what it means to Koreans in Japan, because it was like one of the only sources of true money they could get through this. Like so, like it does. We haven't gotten to it, but like, so that definitely is harder. I did watch something about Pachinko because I was like trying to like, because I don't really know anything about Pachinko. And I was trying to like get some background behind Pachinko, and Pachinko is so big, even to this day, that it's like 4% of the GDP in Tokyo or in Japan. It's still like so drastic.
Is it allowed in Korea?
I don't think it is.
I think it counts as gambling.
They can't gamble,
I think it's
gambling. See, that's really sad though, right? Because it sounds like an aspect.
I don't know when that happened, when that law went into play. Yeah, I don't know, but like, is it counting as gambling if you own it? Is that like?
Yeah, I don't
Can
know.
you own it but not like play it? Like you can like work on the machines but not play it. Like I saw this really. It's what's his name? He's that guy that like has lived in Japan for a while. He does a lot. If you watch like foreigners in Japan, you'll probably know who I'm talking about. The video. I'll like try to remember to link it somewhere. But he was talking to someone about like Pachinko and what it is and what they do and why like they think that like Japan, like the Japanese really like it. And they were talking about how it's like Japanese already love those kinds of games where it's like the instant like thing, like you know, like you go to a temple and get your fortune and it's an instant thing, or like you get the gacha, like the little capsule toys, it's an instant thing. Like it doesn't matter if it's like a full winner. It's like, you know, because like the gacha's like, oh, I got this little cat instead of the other cat, you know, that sort of thing. And the guy that he was talking to said he thinks that like it's because it's so cheap and so laid back that like you could either spend hours or you could go step inside, do it a couple times, and then walk away and not like talk about it again.
Get your moment of happiness from it.
Yeah, like you just get like your little like balls and then you get them in there and then you play like ping pong essentially, and then like you might win, you might not, and sometimes like the winning is like you get a bottle of sake or something, you know. It's like very kind of like laid back, and you don't have to talk to people, which is like, you know, Japanese culture is very like introverted and that's not a thing, so I think that's like a big thing. But
it's clear, like looking at pictures of pachinko machines, this is clearly where that Plinko game came from, right? Like that's clearly where that got. I like it.
Is there anybody who's watching right now that has any questions or wants to comment about the book or movie that we haven't talked about, or needs us to discuss a little bit more about something before we end this stream, because it is 10:30 here.
Yeah,
we'll wait a little bit for the delay, but
yeah,
I'm really excited that this was our grand return. I like really enjoyed doing it, and I hope that we get to do more.
Yeah, we will do another book club. It won't be 3 years before we do book club again.
We have a potential for the next one, maybe.
Yes,
Sky.
We're gonna see if access is as we hope it is,
and if it is, so make sure that you watch out for that. As I said in the beginning, this will be on our YouTube in full. So you can watch this again if you didn't miss stuff. If you missed stuff, if you didn't watch a certain part, you can go back to it. I'll get the time codes up for everybody. Like and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe, baby.
Because we do a lot of streams now. Like we do at least one stream a week. It's different with different people, but we're trying to do one stream a week. Also, our latest episode is out now, so
you can check that out. It's a good one.
Oh my gosh, Lucy, 3:30.
Lucy is up all the time.
I mean,
that's like every
we don't sleep.
What to say? Yeah,
we don't sleep.
I say that, and I like fell asleep at 8 a.m. today.
I have been having such bad luck sleeping. Like I finally got so I don't sleep at all. It's well known. And then I finally got to sleep. I got a fucking Charlie horse at 4 in the morning, and I was like, God damn you. And then the next night I get to sleep, and then there's so in Quebec, which I'm glad that they do. I'm not going to complain that they do this, but all Amber alerts for missing or abducted children get sent to your phone, and my phone's on silent, but my husband hadn't put his phone on silent, and his alert number is like an air raid siren.
That's interesting because it bypasses silent here.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't.
It will bypass silent, but it won't bypass
airplane mode or whatever.
I have a setting on my phone for after 10 o'clock at night, nothing gets through.
Yeah, do not disturb.
Emergency numbers or something, and it doesn't come through.
Yeah, mine it still buzzes, it vibrates, silent. But it doesn't make a noise because I don't have noises for any of my stuff because that stresses me out. So it buzzes, but so it was like and I fall asleep with my phone next to me. Yeah, I fall asleep with my phone next to me, so it's buzzing over here, and then air raid siren from like the other side, and it was like 3 a.m, and I was like, why God?
That reminds me when
once again
I worked at Publix, those came through the lotto machine too. So like it print out the lotto machine, and then on the like scrolling marquee in the front, it would like turn to the thing, and like the license plate number stuff.
What's even funnier is my phone's not even connected to a network. Like since I never leave my house, I just discontinued my phone number and data because like I can just go on Wi-Fi. So it's like, but I don't know what's happening because my phone's a little cursed. I keep getting like text messages that are clearly meant for like another number, but like my phone doesn't even have a SIM card in it, and I keep getting these just like bizarre text messages for like other people.
Maybe it's doing some like weird thing with like the internet,
maybe, I don't know, but anyway, so it still just comes through and harasses me constantly. So who knows, I might sleep tonight, I might not sleep tonight, who knows, we'll see. We'll see.
Little game we play.
You're in a Japanese store.
That's basically The Grudge, but like with my phone. My phone's angry that I don't pay
but
for
it's
any data.
It's like horror adjacent, where it's just like confusing.
Yeah.
Like, it's not words.
I'm in sort of like
You're like
a
Japanese
black
awkward,
like a Black Mirror type comedy of errors.
It's that
like
just slightly askew. Cool. All right, we should go.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
We'll be back soon.